Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. This is a really good turnout for a Saturday morning. You guys wanted to learn about AI and staying compliant in the age of AI. So thank you, Gina, for the introduction, and thank you to B-Sides for having me once again. I am the co-founder of Remediate Cyber Solutions. So we are a small consulting company, and we help small to medium-sized businesses pass their SOC 2 and stay compliant with the other regulations and frameworks that they stay compliant with, as well as help build out their cybersecurity programs. I'm also the founder of Tampa Bay Techies. We have a booth in the downstairs in the expo hall. If you're interested in joining, all of our events are free and open to the public, and we have a couple events a month. So some of our leadership team members are down there, so please stop by and talk to them. I have an MS in Information Technology Management from Western Governors University, and I have a Bachelor's of Science from University of Tampa in Criminology and Criminal Justice with a minor in Cybersecurity. And I've been in the field for about 6 years, and my entire experience has been learning and navigating the different complexities of governance, risk, and compliance. So that entails, once again, helping people pass their SOC 2 audits. I have experience in ISO as well as high trust, and also basically just doing all the unsexy cybersecurity stuff that most people don't want to do. So today we're going to talk about the current state of AI regulations. We're going to go over some of the global, federal, and state level, and also the evolving nature of the current state of AI regulations. And I think that this is a really important area to capture because everything is changing so fast because of the new technologies and the new risks that are coming along with AI. We're going to also go into integrating these AI compliance into your current framework or your current structure, as well as building on top of what you currently have and why this is so important in today's world. We're going to go over some of the integration difficulties as well as some of the implementation guidance, and then we'll leave time for some Q&A at the end. So my two goals for you guys today are to educate you guys again on the evolving landscape, as well as introduce the new regulations that are coming out or have been coming out in the previous years and are evolving into these upcoming years and what to kind of expect, as well as equip you guys with some takeaways, some tools, and some knowledge from today that you can bring to your own companies and organizations, and bring to your higher levels and say, here are some risks that are coming up, and here's what I've learned, and here's what we can do about it. I also wanted to talk about what we won't cover, because I know there's a lot of very low-level tech talks today. This is not one of them. We're basically just going to go over the broader compliance, governance, and risk considerations. I'm not a very hands-on technical person. My business partner is, and he's in the room today. So if you want to talk to him, definitely do that. And so we're just going to go over some of the high-level regulations and compliance frameworks. So I do want to bring up a case study. It's a very well-known case study. It is the Samsung case study from 2023, where 3 separate incidents happened where employees from Samsung were inputting very sensitive information from Samsung into ChatGPT. And this included data from, I think, HR, the HR section, and then also from the semiconductor equipment, which again was very highly sensitive data. And this violated not only data protection protocols, but it also raised the alarms about some of the risks that are apparent and that are emerging within organizations, because at this time, this was a fairly new area of tech for everyone in the whole world. So we didn't really know what to put in place at the time. So the immediate reaction from Samsung was, of course, to just ban all of the Gen AI tools, because again, this was ChatGPT, and enforce their inside policies. But at the time, they didn't have any real internal policies around AI usage. So this led to a strategic shift in internal AI development for Samsung. They ended up, I think, creating 2 internal AI tools. And this really highlighted the need for guardrails, including proactive compliance, not only for Samsung, but also for other organizations in different industries. So when we look at this case study, although it didn't lead to the creation of new laws, it really opened everyone's eyes onto what could we have done to prevent this, or what can we put in place now for these guardrails. So some of the things that I would have put in place first were these clear AI usage policies, as I said before. So we all know about like our acceptable use policy or BYOD policy, those policies that talk about what we can use and what we can use. We talk about AI as one of those now. So what can we put into AI, and what can we use AI for, who can use it, and stuff around that. And then along with that, the employee training and awareness going hand in hand with the clear AI usage policies. How are these policies going to be communicated to our employees, and how can we make sure that they're aware that these policies exist? And then access control and auditing. So again, who can use these Gen AI tools, and also who is using them, when are they using them, and what are they using them for? And then the last one, which I think is the most important, is the AI risk assessment. So really, when we bring in an AI tool, do we know what it's being used in the environment for? Do we know what kind of data is being inputted? Do we know who is using it? And do we know what the output is and what we're going to use the output for? So raise of hands, who uses AI like on a day-to-day, whether it's for content creation or for developing? Well, a recent study back in 2024 came out that over 70% or 78% of companies have adopted AI technologies in at least one business function. And this was a survey that was conducted by McKinsey & Company. And we can see that not only is it being used in tech industries or just in tech functions, but it's being used in marketing and sales, product development, human resources, and finance. And so these are the different functions being used in, and across the different sectors that it's being used in. So of course, a lot of technology, but also professional services, financial services. So we could see that it's not just being used in tech anymore, it's being used all over. So this is why it's so essential that everyone in the organization is really aware and up to date on not only the risks, but the compliance portion of it and the safeguards that we can put in place. Going on to my next question is, who's aware of their AI usage policy, or who knows if their organization even has like a strategy for AI usage? Good, that's a lot more than I was expecting, but that's really good. But in another survey, even a smaller percentage of the people that use AI every day. Are you laughing because you lied? Oh, because you don't have one. Yeah, well, yeah, even a smaller percentage here, we could see that are even aware that they have a strategy. That upper management is not aware that there's even new AI compliance compliance frameworks or regulations out that they can or have to follow, and that people in the organization are not aware of these strategies either. But we'll see later that people in organizations, as we can see here, are so ready to use AI, but we know that AI compliance is an organization-wide effort. So we're going to go into a little bit of the current state of AI regulations. And while we go through these, I want you guys to kind of see what are the recurring themes through the different state to state, or the federal regulations, or the different frameworks that we go through, as well as kind of what's conflicting here, because we'll see that there's different regions or different industries that might have conflicting views and different priorities. So we're going to start with the EU AI Act, because this one is pretty much the first act that came out that really put a hard regulation on anything. Because if anyone's familiar with the GDPR, that's a pretty it's a pretty strenuous framework, and it really aligns with the EU AI Act. So what the EU AI Act does is it splits up AI systems into different categories that we'll get into in a bit, and it classifies them by different risk levels. And it applies regardless of the organization, whether it's based in the EU or not, or it applies if your AI system affects EU citizens, very similarly to what the GDPR applies to. So again, this is a classification of AI systems. So we have the unacceptable risk, the high risk, which we're going to focus on because that has the most stringent requirements, the limited risk, and then the minimal risk. So when we talk about unacceptable risks, we're talking about social scoring and mass surveillance, the stuff that's outright banned in the EU. The high risk, which is AI systems that are used in law enforcement, recruiting, healthcare, finance, even HR systems. So these have the most stringent requirements around them. And then limited risk, so chatbots and emotion recognition. So this is where, like, if you guys ever open up a chatbot and it says, like, oh, you're chatting with AI right now, like, this is not a human. Those are the transparency requirements that the limited risk type systems are required to have. And then we have the minimal risk. So the spam filters, video games, if you open up your Snapchat and you're taking like a little picture of yourself, those filters that come up, that's the minimal risk. Those really don't have any requirements. So talking about the high-risk AI system, what you'll see if you are so compelled to read the EU AI Act, it's online, but it talks about governance throughout the entire AI system's life cycle, not just when you're creating it, not just when you're deploying it, but through the entire life cycle, right? So the first thing that it talks about is risk management. So you have to have a risk management system throughout the entire AI's life cycle. So we have to make sure that we're governing all the data that's being put through and all the data that's being put through the system and going out of the system. And we also have to ensure that this data is relevant, accurate, and complete. And you also have to make sure that throughout the system's life cycle, when you're developing it or deploying it, all the data inside of it is compliant with the GDPR or any of the other regulations that you're required to follow. You have to maintain documentation, technical documentation of the system's purpose and use, where the training data is coming from, as well as the risk controls and monitoring that you're putting on the AI system. The AI system has to be designed for record keeping and logging. So the performance has to be tracked. Again, AI, very new stuff here that we're talking about when we're talking about developing and deploying. So the performance has to be tracked for the AI system. And this documentation of the logging has to be secure, traceable, and retained appropriately. The AI system also has to be transparent, and the information has to be available for users and clear for users. This is kind of where we see like a crossover between the GDPR and the EU AI Act. If you're familiar with one of the legal ways of getting consent, it has to be transparent. So you have to make sure that your user is aware of what they're consenting to. That's another thing with using AI systems. And the AI system also has to have human oversight. So it should be monitored and supervised by humans, and they should be able to prevent or minimize risks. And they should allow for human intervention or override. Just in case something goes wrong, a human has to be able to fix that. And of course, for security, there has to be appropriate levels of cybersecurity and built-in mechanisms for failure. So I want to go over the US AI policy regulations and laws in a timeline framework first, because there is a little bit of stuff being shuffled around. Going through 2019, 2022, 2023, and 2025, there is different priorities through the different areas of government here. So we're going to start off with the American AI Initiative and then go into the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, and then the two different executive orders, and we're going to compare them to each other. So as of right now, there's no single federal law that regulates any AI systems in the US. So that's why we see them kind of differentiated by industry and sector, as well as by region. But we'll see a lot of the themes here are for advancing the AI R&D in the US, as well as some of them being shifted towards security and privacy. So the first is the American AI Initiative that came out in 2019. And this established the National AI Initiative Office, which we still see today. And their main goal was to create the AI policies and the sharing of resources. So these are the core objectives of the American AI Initiative. So prioritize AI research and development, enhance access to federal resources, set AI technical standards, build an AI-ready workforce, and engage internationally. So you can see here, this was a lot about encouraging research, development, collaboration, not only within the US, but also globally and internationally with the other big players in the AI area. Then moving on to 2022 for the Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. This was a policy guide. It was a non-binding framework, unlike the EU AI Act, and it emphasized ethical AI use while encouraging innovation. So again, another policy guide that encouraged innovation and R&D. So the 5 core principles here were safe and effective systems. So again, making sure that these systems were tested and monitored to make sure that they work as intended, as well as documented risk mitigation strategies and making sure that the developers and deployers of AI had risk mitigation strategies in place. The second one is the algorithmic discrimination protections, which we'll see as like a common theme in a few of the other frameworks, where the AI system has to be free from discrimination. Data privacy, so people should have agency over how their data is used, and also the AI system should minimize data collection and have strong security measures in place. Notice and explanation, so another transparency principle here. People should be informed when an AI system is being used. So again, like a chatbot saying AI is being used here, or if something is AI generated, like a photo or an audio or video, it has to be in user-friendly terms saying, hey, just so you know, AI was used here for this to be generated or altered or whatnot. And then human alternatives, another theme that we saw earlier. People have to be able to opt out of AI-driven decisions, and there should be a human review process for decision-making that was by AI. So we're going to look at the 2 executive orders that were passed. The first one being signed by former President Joe Biden in 2023. So the aim here was to prioritize innovation while mitigating risk. So this focused on risk-centered AI governance and protected the rights, safety, and national security from AI risk. So this executive order really focused on red teaming, safety test results being shared by developers, and called for standards being developed in various industries. And then we have the newer executive order, which was signed earlier this year by President Donald Trump. This revoked all of the safety measures in the previous executive order, and the aim was to really develop rapidly for AI, and they wanted to reduce regulatory barriers and really eliminate those obstacles for AI development. The most recent executive order also called for the creation of a 180-day action plan, which meant like reviewing the previous executive order and just updating it to be more prioritized to R&D. So now I'm going to state-specific regulations. I'll show you guys some like tools and some interactive maps and stuff that you can take a look at, because these are literally getting updated like every single day. As of 2024, at least 45 states have introduced AI-related bills, and 31 states have enacted legislation or resolution, And these laws cover diverse aspects such as algorithmic bias, automated employment decision tools, and AI use in education. So as you can see, AI here is being used for such a wide range of different like functions. You can't really just put it under one law or one regulation, right? So that's why it's so specific to each region and each industry. So we're going to take a look at Colorado and California, because those are the ones that are a little bit more developed. So the Colorado AI Act, that's a really pretty picture. I've never been to Colorado, but so the Colorado AI Act is aimed to protect consumers from algorithmic discrimination. And what we mean by algorithmic discrimination is any differential treatment that's based on a trait, so like race, disability, gender, anything like that, and the regulated use of high-risk AI systems. And by high-risk AI systems, we're talking about employment, housing, credit, healthcare, insurance. So we could see where it's kind of, merging or doing a little play off of the EU AI Act. And this is kind of where I see a lot of our laws kind of going state by state. So the Colorado AI Act calls for role-specific obligations for developers and deployers, two of them being the duty of care to protect consumers from risks of the algorithmic discrimination and doing the risk management and impact assessments. So what that means is that developers and deployers of these tools have to say, okay, if you're a person using this, here's the risk of you having differential treatment because of this, and this. And they have to also, take into consideration what the data sources are as well. So moving on to the California AI Act. The California AI Act is a suite of new laws, again, still developing. I think they only have a few that are officially developed. The first one being the California AI Transparency Act, and this is aimed to enhance transparency in AI-generated content. So this imposes requirements on large-scale Gen AI providers to ensure that consumers can identify and verify AI-generated images, videos, and audio. And I think the California AI Act is this strict because we have laws like the CCPA that have been in motion and there for such a long time, just like how the GDPR has been in Europe. So this applies to covered providers, which are entities that create code or produce a Gen AI system with over 1 million monthly users and is publicly accessible within California. So the requirements here, kind of the same that we've seen on the same theme, is that they have to have an AI detection tool, so users have to be able to assess whether the content was created or altered by their Gen AI system. They have to have a content disclosure, so again, it has to say this was generated or altered by AI. And there also has to be a third-party license oversight. So if the Gen AI is licensed to a third party, there has to be certain requirements in place in those licenses. So getting into the evolving nature of AI regulations, over 69 countries have proposed more than 1,000 related policy initiatives. So thinking about that and thinking about kind of the overlap of what I just talked to you guys about, can you imagine how it is being a C-level executive or a policymaker that has to just oversee everything and make rules for one company given all the different, regulations and laws that you guys now know of. So we also see that while the EU AI Act has a risk-based approach, like I mentioned, the US is more state by state as well as industry by industry. We also see a shift from principles to enforcement. One could argue, though, that these are it's not going very well, right? There's so many different regulations that are still voluntary, and then there's a lot that are binding, and then there are some that are coming back and saying, actually this isn't a priority right now, we should shift to X, Y, and Z. And then there's also emphasis on safety, security, and accountability. So governments are prioritizing AI safety, cybersecurity, data protection, and transparency, whereas before it was a lot more focused on R&D and research. Now we're looking at governments that are prioritizing the safety and data protection. What to expect next, what I can see coming along is continued regulatory divergence between regions. We know that, like I said, there's different regions that have certain regulations, different laws, different industries that have different laws and regulations as well. However, there is going to be a rise in cross-border cooperation. I'll get into later on some frameworks and principles that we'll see, different countries and different regions have agreed on would be the best for deployers and developers of AI systems to follow. And then again, just some new laws and some new regulations around the authenticity, safety and security, transparency, and accountability. So now we're going to talk about a little bit about integrating AI compliance. So how can we take these new laws and regulations that we just learned and take them back into our organizations and make sure that, you know, we're following what we need to, or that we're ready for an audit, or we're ready for a customer to come in and say, hey, we need some proof of your AI compliance. Do you have that for me? So first, talking about integration difficulties, again, there's the regulatory fragmentation and divergence. There's these different patches of state level and global level regulations, especially for American companies. Excuse me. And then there's that compliance and legal uncertainty. So a lot of these standards and laws and regulations, if you read them online, it's a whole bunch of legal jargon. And a lot of organizations are unsure of which ones apply to them. And this makes long-term planning and investing riskier, especially if you're a really large organization. Has anyone ever tried to, during COVID, like, did you guys try to plan like a big event? Did anyone try to plan a big event during COVID, like, you know, like a wedding? Yeah, raise your hands if you tried to do something like that. How hard was that, you know? Because like you're like, in a couple of years, how much money am I gonna have? How much is this gonna cost? Am I even gonna be able to fly here, right? It's like that, because we don't know what the area of AI is gonna look like, what tech's gonna look like, what jobs are gonna be available, what new tools are gonna be out by that time. And then it's an operational and governance overhaul. So now we're bringing in these new risks because, again, AI risks are changing every single day. So now we need a new area of risk, like risk officers and a cybersecurity area just for AI. And they need to be trained as well on AI risks. So this can be really resource intensive for organizations. And then the risks of noncompliance, we have the legal and regulatory penalties. There can be monetary fines. The EU AI Act and the California AI Transparency Act have monetary fines in place if you don't follow them. And then you can lose your licenses or certifications depending on the industry that you're in, especially if it's a highly regulated industry like finance or healthcare. And then, of course, the reputational damage, the loss of trust and brand damage, and then security risks. You know, a lot of these frameworks and regulations require risk assessments and impact assessments. And a lot of times, if you don't conduct those, you don't know what kind of risks are still open, especially when it's like a system lifestyle or life cycle type of assessment. And then I always like to say, you know, we can't secure what we don't know is in our environment. If those risk assessments or impact assessments aren't being conducted within the organization, you might not know what AI tools are being used within your organization. Maybe your organization only allows to use, like, if you're a Microsoft organization, to use Copilot for Gen AI, but then you have people using ChatGPT, and you have people using Grok, and you have people using, you know, all these different areas that you don't know what data they're inputting and what's coming out as well, and what they're using it for. So the first kind of framework that came out of all of this for helping people and helping organizations come into compliance with the different laws and regulations was the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They've got a really, really great website, very thorough, and they have what's called value-based principles, which are made for policymakers, the developers, deployers, and users of AI. And then they have the recommendations for policymakers, which we're not going to get into here, but we're going to focus on the value-based principles. So these principles were adopted by over 47 countries, including the US and EU member states. These are voluntary, but again, they're globally recognized. So principles, again, are pretty overlapping with what we've seen, but inclusive growth, sustainable development, and well-being. So this really means that AI should help benefit people and the planet. Human-centered values and fairness. So AI systems should respect like human rights such as privacy and non-discrimination, transparency and explainability. So the AI system should be understandable and traceable, and then there also should be relevant communication about how decisions are made by the AI system. Robustness, security, and safety. So AI should function reliably and securely throughout its life cycle, and there should also be safeguards around these risks. And then accountability. Organizations that are developing and deploying these AI should be held responsible for the outcomes. So again, this is a really great website. If you just look up the OECD AI principles, you could do a deep dive there and click on like each of the principles. It'll show you what areas have like initiatives for each of the principles. The next one I want to go through is the NIST AI RMF, which, if you guys were at my presentation last year, I did one on the NIST RMF, so the risk management framework. So NIST is the voluntary framework that helps organizations manage risks that are associated with AI development, deployment, and use. They help organizations identify, assess, manage, and monitor risks. And this is a flexible and adaptable framework across sectors and AI maturity levels. So there's two main components here. There's the NIST AI RMF core and then the AI RMF profile. So we're going to focus on the core for today. So if you guys are familiar with the with the NIST RMF, it's also kind of like a circle like this. And in the middle is govern, because throughout the process, throughout the risk assessment process, we always want to make sure that there's the policies and procedures in place and that we're always drawing back to the policies and procedures and the governance throughout the risk assessment process. So again, govern relates to the culture of risk management throughout your organization. So what kind of risk treatment do we have? What is the acceptable risk tolerance? Who's involved with the risk assessment process and stuff like that. Then we have MAP up there, which is mapping the context and the scope of the AI. So what is the AI used for? What are its goals? What's its business objective? Who will be impacted by this AI system? Is it going to be customer facing? Is it going to be internal facing? Is it going to be just like a Gen AI type of system? And also, what are its data sources? This is super important. Who's going to be putting information into the AI system, and what kind of information can we put inside the AI system? Then moving on to the measure portion of it, which is really where we're going to use the quantitative and qualitative methods to assess the AI risk, and we measure the likelihood and impact of the risk. So if you've ever seen like kind of those matrices where you score it based on its risk level, that's where we're going to do it in this step. And we're also going to try to understand how well the AI system works under different conditions. And this is also where we see vulnerabilities that'll pop up and how we're going to detect the vulnerabilities and be able to mitigate them. And then manage, so we're going to prioritize and act on the risk based on the impact, and we're going to do this proactively. That's why we implement these kind of risk management frameworks, so that we're doing like a proactive exercise, right? And then we're going to continuously improve these models and this risk management framework and align them with the business objectives and regulations that we've seen. Moving on to ISO. If anyone uses ISO, it's like a globally recognized framework. You have to pay for it, so I don't use it, and it's expensive. But yeah, but you know, it's a great framework. It builds on top of ISO 31000, which is like their risk management framework version of ISO. It's comparable to NIST, but it has a little bit different core principles here. So inclusivity. ISO says that, you know, AI brings in a whole bunch of new different risks. So In that case, we have to bring in a whole bunch of new stakeholders, so people that we normally wouldn't bring into the risk assessment process. Transparency and explainability, so AI risk decisions have to be understandable and traceable. Dynamic and continuous, so like I said, AI is getting updated and is changing every single day. It's not static and it's evolving, just like the risks. And it has to be continuous as well. So not only are like developers and deployers updating the AI, but customers are expecting more, and the legal and regulatory personnel are also updating every day, like I said before. So you have to learn, adapt, and improve how you manage your AI risks, because everything else in the AI realm is also evolving. Using the best information available. So this is an interesting principle that says AI should use the most up-to-date information as possible, right? Like AI uses current and historical data, as well as data that might be coming up too. So developers and deployers have to use the most current data that they can. And this is also where developers and deployers have to document their limitations of the AI, as well as some of the gaps that need to be taken into account. And this is also where we have to see detailed records of how AI is being used within their environment, so we know what to expect. And then human and cultural factors. So developers and deployers of AI have to be aware of how their AI system is affecting society. So adapting to new regulations. This is where we're going to get into how you can take all this back into your organizations. So the first thing that you guys want to do is think about what regulations do you currently follow. So are you aligned with NIST and ISO? And which ones can you really bring back and put on top of what you're using right now? Identify your current and target state, so performing an organization-wide risk assessment, and thinking about your contractual obligations. So when I am brought into an organization, they say, hey, can you do a risk assessment for me? The first thing I do is say, yeah, give me all your VPs. And we gather the VPs from finance, from HR, from all the tech teams, and I say, what are you guys using, and do you know the risks of those? And usually they know what they're using, but they leave out a couple because they don't realize that there's risks there. And especially now that almost every single product in an organization is having a new AI component to it, it's really important that we do this regularly, conduct risk assessments regularly, so that we can see these new AI risks that are being involved as well. So conducting an organization-wide risk and gap assessment, thinking about what kind of data is being inputted, and identifying your current state and your target state. Another thing that I really want to stress is to not reinvent the wheel. So use your current risk management, cybersecurity, and data governance structures to include the AI-specific risks. So you don't have to really go out of your way and do like a whole brand new, this is a risk assessment just for AI tools. It's something that can be incorporated. Treat it as a new asset or a new software. If you have a third-party risk management strategy already, just incorporate the AI into there. And then once you deal with the new laws and regulations, then include that as a risk. Like maybe we're at risk of not being in compliance with this law or this law. And then, of course, build a culture of AI compliance. So establishing the AI usage policy and communicating the risk early on. Just like with any new product or any new risk that you're using, do an acceptable AI usage policy. What kind of data can or can't be put into the AI accepted and prohibited AI systems, mandate like an onboarding process for new systems and stuff like that. And for continuous learning, emerging AI threats, the MITRE Atlas matrix, really great matrix to look at the new threats for AI. Stay up to date on new regulatory changes. So the IAPP, the International, I don't remember what that stands for, but they've got like policy trackers that are being updated regularly. where you could see where the legislation is at in different areas. And then the OECD, again, they have an interactive map where you can see the initiatives. And then self-assessments, there's EU AI Act compliance checkers, where you can, it's like kind of like a quiz thing. It goes through and asks about your organization as well as the controls you have in place. And it says like, you're in compliance or you're not in compliance. It's almost like it's a simple gap assessment. It's a good place to start. And here are just some of my final thoughts. AI regulations are evolving, and it's really important that organizations stay informed and adaptable. And to stay compliant, organizations must operationalize these principles by aligning with these frameworks and putting all of the safeguards in place that we mentioned. Thank you. And here's my information. If you have any questions, please feel free. I think we've got like 5 minutes, so.